Hello, I'm Jay Fadden, and I'm so glad you could join us today. The streets of Rome are relatively quiet right now, but only yesterday they were filled with millions of people, all here for the funeral of Pope John Paul II. And that was going to be our story. But after being here for several days, we found that the story was much larger than even that. It was about the people and their Catholic faith, many of whom traveled from far distances away to be here with a man they loved and they admired. People who stood in line, who went through great hardships, who slept on the ground. And that's the story we're going to bring into your home. We're going to tell you about people whose faith life is so vibrant. The Catholic Church is alive, and that's what we found in Rome.
The media was ever present at the memorial service and funeral of Pope John Paul II. They brought into millions upon millions of homes the coverage of the events happening at St. Peter's Basilica and around Rome. Whether television, radio, newspaper, or internet, they presented many angles, always looking for a story. For me, though, the story was more than about the death of the Holy Father. The story was about the Catholic faith and of the people who live out that faith. I have had the privilege to travel to many locations around the world and witness many events, but nothing compares to Rome. After his death, a line began to form so people could pay their last respects. People began to arrive, and they never stopped. The line grew and it grew, with people waiting over 10 hours to see the Holy Father and say goodbye.
I've been in line 9 hours until we hit the Via della Conciliazione now, waiting to be able to pay my respects to the Holy Father and to thank him for the wonderful gift that he's been during all but 1 year of my priesthood. And we had a special Mass for our Holy Father's intentions last Saturday in my parish. And then on Sunday, he had died, and so we offered the Masses for him and had some special celebrations. And after Mass, a couple from the parish came up and said they had gone on the internet and they would like me to represent them here and the parish at the funeral. So I called the bishop and he said, of course. And so they treated me to be able to come here and to do this. They know that I'm a convert, and the papacy and the Eucharist and the Blessed Mother, all three so important to John Paul II, of course, as to every pope, has been so important to me. So it's a great privilege to be able to be here.
They stood together in solidarity, quietly and patiently bearing up to the elements. Many were tired, some hungry, but still they waited as more pilgrims continued to flock to the city.
I think we are lucky to be, in the crowd. I think we are lucky that we can have the chance to pay the last respect. And, I feel moved, by all these.
This is, really a highlight for our trip and,
Exactly.
a memory in our life.
What would make people from all over the world wait in such a long line with such hardships? The days were hot, the nights were cold, but still they waited as the line continued to grow longer until it stretched for over a mile from St. Peter's Basilica. Was this the Catholic Church so many say is out of touch? Then who were these millions of people? Was this the Church besieged by critics? Not in touch with reality? People kept coming and arriving in the city.
The Pope did so much for us, so why not be here and spend the hours, his last hours here.
What's your impressions of the Pope, of John Paul II?
Just a great person. Reached out to many religions, and definitely somebody to look up to.
The crowd just goes on and on and on. I used to live here in Rome. I lived about 2 blocks away from here. I've never seen this many people in my life, and I think it's actually very inspirational to see this many people willing to stand in line in this sun to say goodbye to the Holy Father personally. I think it's just amazing.
Young people who connected with the message of the Holy Father stood in line. Senior citizens stood in line. Parents, millions of people, all coming to say goodbye to their spiritual leader, Pope John Paul II.
I think he signifies peace, love, happiness throughout the world. And I think it's very important that one should come and see him.
Grazie, Cinque, gracias. It all meant the same thing. Thank you to Pope John Paul II. All those millions came to say we are here for you as you have been there for us. Catholics and people of other faiths united in their love and respect for the Holy Father.
Why did you come here today, sister?
Because I love the Holy Father so much, and he has given me the faith, the hope, everything. I'm so happy to be here.
As the line grew longer, people did not turn away. They could have gone home, but they didn't. They waited and waited. Even as their feet ached and their legs trembled, they pressed forward. Their resolve was strong, their hearts filled with faith. I kept asking myself, was this the Catholic Church I've heard so much criticism about? Who were these people? As I stood in line, a young French girl prayed the rosary beside me. A German group of young men sang along with the music played over the loudspeakers. As my hand brushed the railing, I felt hardened wax from where a vigil candle must have rested. This was the Catholic Church I believe in, alive and vibrant, focusing on Christ, the community of faithful turning out in all their splendor, adorned not with objections, but with the love of Christ in their hearts. As I entered St. Peter's Basilica, where the Pope's body lied, I began my walk down the main aisle. Beside me was a 20-something Polish girl who made her way to the resting place of the Holy Father by moving on her knees. I was taken aback as she crossed over a steel grate and didn't even flinch, her hands folded in prayer, a tear rolling down her cheek. People wept and blessed themselves as they passed by the body of Pope John Paul II. As I turned the corner, I was amazed. I saw thousands of people filling the sides of the basilica. They knelt on the hard marble and prayed. Many wept openly as their shoulders heaved. After waiting up to 15 hours in line, they still would not leave. They wanted to pray. This is a Catholic Church, the church that Jesus founded. The line did not dissipate at night. Still hundreds of thousands of people came. Some stood quietly while others recited the rosary, prayed, or even sang. The cold night did not deter them. They were a community of faith joined by their brothers and sisters in Christ. While most could not communicate due to language barriers, they politely moved forward. The line continued to move, but it also continued to grow as more people came, all uplifted by the hope Jesus gives all of us to hold on that 1 second longer. They had hope in God and each other. This was a Catholic Church, the Catholic Church at its finest, a community of faith with all eyes focused on Jesus. This was the universal church with people setting aside differences in politics and cultures to be joined in what they have in common, their Catholic faith and their life in Christ. With millions of people and the resources strained to the limit, crowd control was at a premium. The security was unparalleled in terms of effectiveness and the cooperative spirit in which they did their job. The security people were polite yet firm and genuinely seemed to care for the pilgrims. They constantly monitored the crowd and were a reassuring presence to everybody. The crowd in turn were very respectful of the security force, and thus there became a great deal of cooperativeness between them. In the long lines in the hot sun, there were instances of people becoming overcome by the circumstances. Throughout the long lines, there were medics ready to assist those who became ill or dehydrated. They checked the pilgrims with great care and quickly were there any time their services were needed. They were very gentle and kind as they moved through the crowd to get someone out who had become ill. The crowd was invaluable, assisting them by calling for help and then making room for the medics to move through an extremely congested area to rescue whoever was in need of help. The security medics worked to the point of exhaustion to ensure the safety of the pilgrims. All along the lines, volunteers handed out free bottles of water to prevent dehydration. People patiently waited as bottle after bottle was passed through the crowd. Even those who were thirsty passed bottles to others so that all got their needs filled. There was no hoarding of water, only sharing with one another. The security, medics, volunteers, and pilgrims worked together to ensure the safety of everyone. It was a true community spirit on the behalf of everyone. In today's world, we sometimes can feel alone in our faith. Attacked from all sides, we can feel as if our Catholic faith is something that we should hold to ourselves, afraid of the scorn we might receive from others. We sometimes feel alone in a world filled with doubters and critics. But we are not alone in our faith. Christ is there to comfort and console us, and He will never abandon us. That was never more clear than in Rome. When the Holy Father's health was reported to be gravely ill, many people began to flock to St. Peter's Basilica to hold vigil under the Holy Father's window.
I love the Pope. I mean, this is the only Pope I've ever known in my lifetime. This is the Pope. And so I've always saved my frequent flyer miles knowing the day might come eventually. So Friday, when he was in grave condition, I booked a flight. 3 hours later, the plane took off, and I was in the piazza for 6 hours before he did pass away. And I just wanted to be able to pray for him while he was still alive and, of course, be here to celebrate his life.
After his death, pilgrims began to arrive filled with faith. These people shared a love of God and of the Eucharist, which is the source and summit of our life in Christ. They prayed together filled with the love of God, knowing their faith told them He was ever present in their lives as Catholics. People of all walks of life, from different countries and cultures, rich and poor, were joined by their thirst for God's loving touch. No borders or language barriers could prevent them from sharing this experience together. An experience that transcended well beyond the city limits of Rome, but it was also in the homes of all the faith-filled Catholics who through baptism are united with Christ and He with them. On display in Rome was the universal church, whose focus is squarely on Christ. It is through Jesus that we live, move, and have our being. We celebrate our faith as these millions of pilgrims do. We, like the pilgrims, are invested into the church, whose life at its very core is found with Jesus in the Eucharist. It is through this that we achieve the salvation Christ guaranteed us through His death and resurrection. These pilgrims from every corner of the world sacrifice to demonstrate and live out their Catholic faith and show what they believe, just like billions around the world do, many of who do so quietly in their own homes. After witnessing the events in Rome, let me assure you, you are not alone. Pope John Paul II had a special relationship with young people. He traveled around the world to be present with them. They shared a special bond. He told them that He cared for them and that they mattered. He asked them to follow Christ and they accepted. He challenged them not to be ashamed of their faith and to live out the Gospels, and they responded. The Holy Father asked nothing of them that He Himself was not willing to do. He led by example, never deviating from His Catholic beliefs because of intense pressure to assimilate to cultural norms. He told them that it was Christ that He followed, and not the ebb and flow of societal change. That the sanctity of all life is based on the transcendent value of a human person. No human being must be treated as an object. That a person is created in God's image and therefore has infinite value. And the young people listened. He told them that they were not the future of the church, but were the present of the church, and that through their veins pulsated the faith. And they needed to take responsibility. He asked them to go out into the world and preach the good news of Jesus. Ultimately, He believed in them, and in turn, they trusted Him. Everywhere you turned, you saw a young person whose life He touched. The young people were strengthened by each other's presence, the common thread being their respect for the Pope and their love and devotion for their Catholic faith. Indeed, the Holy Father's message resonated with them, a message they carry with them from St. Peter's Basilica and into the world. over 1 million people from Poland came to say goodbye to the Holy Father. He was the son of Poland and their beloved Karol Wojtyła. The streets of Rome were draped with Polish flags and signs. A deeply faith-filled Catholic country, Poland respected the Holy Father for his devotion to God. They called him Papa or Father. He was a national hero.
For Polish people, he is special from 2 points. One, he's a pope. Poland is a very Christian country, so we always believe we are very connected to a pope, to church, and to religion. And from the other side, this most important for Polish people that he was a Polish. We felt really special. Now we know that we lose not only a pope, but the greatest Polish man. The greatest man who we have to thank for really a lot of things. Thanks for feelings that we had every time that someone said you're from Poland, like Pope, like so it's okay. We like it. We're happy about that. So we are sad because of really a lot of things connected to Pope, and we're really sorry. We know that we lose not only the Pope, but we lose our leader, because he was the leader of Polish nation.
They'd come to say dziękuję, which is thank you in Polish. He'd been there for them, and now they were here for him in the millions.
When they wanted to give him a Nobel Prize, we were laughing at that, because it was, what is a Nobel Prize for Pope? He should have, some super Nobel or something like that. It's not enough to give him a Nobel. So Pope, it's for us, I think, the most important Polish people ever in our history.
In Mass, they turned out because he brought them closer to Jesus. They loved him and he loved them. It was a source of great national pride that one of their own was the Vicar of Christ that they so cherished. Throughout Rome, memorials to Pope John Paul II appeared everywhere. Candles burned bright as flames flickered and danced in the breeze. The light of Christ shone bright in these memorials. They signified a light that was not extinguished in death, but burned in the hearts and minds of millions came to say goodbye, and the billions praying throughout the world for Pope John Paul II. He had engraved in these pilgrims' heart the love of Christ, and the light of the candles penetrated the surrounding darkness and illuminated that love in their souls. As St. John wrote, God is love, and his love burned hot in the flames so many lit, each candle a reminder of a life devoted to Christ. People carried crosses whose weight was not measured in pounds, but in the sadness of losing a disciple of Christ. Flowers were clutched in the hands of those paying tribute to the Pope. Many had clung to these flowers for hours, their hands tied and sore from the grip they held, yet their resolve strengthened by the admiration for a man who spoke so eloquently for them about a God they followed. I will be with you always, Jesus told the apostles, and as the people continued to light the candles, that was evident. He is present in their hearts. He permeates the air. As the saying goes, light one candle and curse the darkness. As night fell, Rome shone bright with not only the light from the candles, but from the Catholic faith, as so many joined as a community to pray together and to be a universal church dedicated to praising God's name. From all corners of the world, people arrived. They flocked to St. Peter's with no regard for their own comfort. This was not a trip of leisure or vacation, but a spiritual journey. Many of them came only because their heart told them that they had to be there. Like Joseph and Mary, though, there was no room at the inn. The hotels were long since filled, so they had to make do. Many came only with the clothes on their backs, but they continued on their journey of faith. At first, you would notice a few sleeping on stone benches or the cobblestone sidewalks. But as the days grew closer to the funeral, the streets became filled with people who became known as sleepers. Everywhere you turned, the sleepers were, filling every space available. Their Catholic faith was strong and alive as they endured great hardships and sacrificed to celebrate the life and death of the Holy Father. Many prayed and sang late into the night. They stood and slept shoulder to shoulder with complete strangers, but comfortable in the fact that they shared a faith and a relationship with the Lord. Together they made a powerful community of faith. Through cold nights, they clung to their faith as tightly as they clung to their blankets or sleeping bags. They were willing to be uncomfortable to be at St. Peter's Basilica. Their upbeat and positive attitude belied the fact that they were sacrificing so much. They were warmed by the spirit of each other and of Christ, a warmth that could not be extinguished. The funeral was held at St. Peter's Basilica. The crowd that had filled the city now pressed forward to be in St. Peter's Square. They came by the hundreds of thousands, each person leading a different life, but all with the conviction of their faith. The sheer volume of people was astounding, from a trickle at first to a constant flow. This continued until the square could fit no more. The street leading to the basilica was overflowing with those who could not fit into the square. They watched on huge video screens that were interspersed on the street. They were not upset that they could not get in because they were still present. Many did not know why they had come. They only knew that they needed to be in Rome to pay tribute to John Paul II. Security was tight, but as always polite and firm. People understood and cordially accepted it. The square and streets were filled with flags and banners from every nation. The people accepted each other and respected one another, each person important and vital. Priests, bishops, cardinals, dignitaries, and the community of faithful had come to say goodbye and to celebrate who Pope John Paul II was, a man of conviction, a man of hope, and most importantly, a man of faith and prayer. Many were sad to say farewell to the Pope, but knew they were fortunate to have known the Pope and had him in their lives. As the faces reflected sadness, the Pope's motto, "Totally yours," echoed in my head. He gave himself totally and freely to proclaiming the good news of Christ. He did not waver or recoil. He was unashamed to share his faith. "Be not afraid" was a line he used, and looking at the people, one could only think of that phrase. Be not afraid of your faith. Be not afraid of evangelizing. Be not afraid of loving God as he loves you. Be not afraid of the truth. Be not afraid of death. Be not afraid of life. Be not afraid of the slings and arrows others throw your way. Be not afraid of being a follower of Christ. Be not afraid because God is with you now and until the end of time. In that simple wooden coffin rested the body of Pope John Paul II. Now the promise of Christ through his death and resurrection and joined to us by baptism are fulfilled. Carol Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II, has received salvation. As the priests made their way through the crowd to distribute communion, people formed a ring around them. The Eucharist, the source and summit of our life in Christ, was so precious to these faithful and to all Catholics. Many paid great reverence to receiving the Eucharist, which Catholics believe is the real presence of Christ. Their hands stretched out as the faithful strained to fulfill their obligations. These faith-filled people yearning for, thirsting to receive Christ. Many people, many searching as they continue their journey through sometimes difficult lives, find peace and consolation in their Catholic faith. Ringing in my head was, "Do not be afraid." As communion ended, the congregation began to clap. They continued to clap. How fitting that a pontificate that started 26 years ago with applause would end the same way. The funeral ended, and those watching in the streets on the large screens could hold back no longer. Pain ran from their eyes as they wiped back tears. It is never easy saying goodbye to someone you love, but after much suffering, the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, rests in peace. Be not afraid, and may God be with you, Pope John Paul II.